Hi there, and welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight's story begins with a dream. A dream so vivid, so terrifying, that by morning, its dreamer was dead. She had told her friends about it. Every chilling detail, every face she saw in the dark. And when her body was found exactly as she had described, Hercule Poirot was left with one impossible question. Can a dream predict murder or cause it? As Poirot traces the echoes between sleep and reality, he uncovers a secret that refused to stay buried, and a killer who used the power of fear itself to strike. Stay with us till the end. And if you love mysteries where nightmares blur into truth, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Haunting Vales. Chapter 1. The Dream Begins. The rain had begun long before dawn. It fell in thin silver threads against the windows of Enderby Hall, tracing faint trails down the glass like veins of sorrow. Inside, the house was silent, too silent. Only the faint hum of the grandfather clock broke through the quiet, marking time that seemed reluctant to move forward. It was there, in that uneasy stillness, that Hercule Poirot stood. His shoes were polished to a mirror's shine, his gray suit uncreased despite the long journey. He stood in the hallway, studying the portrait above the staircase, a young woman in white, painted with haunting precision. Her eyes seemed alive, following him wherever he moved. The woman in the painting was Clara Melrose, 25 years old, heiress to a vast estate, and found dead in her bed only 2 nights before. Her expression peaceful, her body untouched, no sign of violence. But she had died exactly as she had described in her final dream. Poirot turned as footsteps echoed down the corridor. Inspector Graves appeared, his coat still damp from the rain. His voice carried the heaviness of sleepless hours. "Morning, Poirot. The family's in the drawing room. They're expecting you." Poirot nodded gently. "I thank you, Inspector, and I presume you have not found anything unusual?" "Graves hesitativ. That depends on what you call unusual." She told her maid she'd dreamt her own death, down to the smallest detail. Same dress, same room, same position on the bed. Everything. He exhaled. It's as if she saw it coming. Poirot's gaze lingered on the portrait once more. To dream of one's death, and then to die as foretold. It is a thing that chills the bones, yes? But we must remember, Mon. He stopped himself, lips tightening. We must remember, Inspector, that even the strangest things have reasons. The 2 men entered the drawing room. The family sat in silence, their faces pale under the dim light. At the center, in an armchair near the fire, sat Lady Melrose, Clara's mother, her face drawn, her voice brittle as glass. Beside her, Edwin Melrose, the younger brother, stared into the flames, his jaw tight, with something that looked very much like guilt. And near the window stood Dr. Lewis Crane, the family physician, hands clasped behind his back, his eyes unreadable. Poirot inclined his head. "I am deeply sorry for your loss. I will ask only what must be asked. The truth, you understand, is a delicate thing. It must be handled gently." Lady Melrose's voice trembled. "She was frightened, Mr. Poirot. She told me she had seen it, her death. Night after night, the same dream. She said she saw herself lying in her bed, wearing the white gown her father gave her when she was 16. She said she couldn't move, couldn't scream. And then darkness." Edwin turned sharply. "She wasn't well. She hadn't been for weeks. You know that mother? The doctor said it was exhaustion, that she needed rest." Dr. Crane spoke softly. "She was under my care. Her pulse was steady. Her heart was sound. There was no sign of illness." He paused. "And yet, I cannot explain what happened." Poirot walked to the window, gazing out at the drenched garden beyond. "You tell me, Doctor, was she taking anything for sleep?" "Only a mild sedative," Crane said. "A herbal mixture. I made it myself. Nothing harmful. Poirot's eyes flickered. You made it yourself? Yes. A simple tincture. Lavender, valerian, a few other herbs. She said it helped calm her mind. Poirot nodded slowly. Sometimes the mind was not what needed calming. Sometimes it was the conscience. He turned to Lady Melrose. Your daughter's last day. Tell me of it. Lady Melrose's hands trembled on her lap. She was quiet that morning. She went out walking by the lake. She said she wanted to clear her thoughts. When she came back, she was pale. I asked her what was wrong, and she said, It's close now, Mother. I can feel it. Feel what? Poirot asked softly. Her eyes filled with tears. Her death. A faint thunder rolled across the moors outside. Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. And the night she died, she had supper in her room. Soup and tea. She told her maid to lock the door from the inside. No one went in until morning. And when a maid did, she found her cold. Eyes closed. Hands folded. Lady Melrose swallowed. Like she'd gone to sleep inside her dream. Poirot looked toward the staircase, as though he could see the room from where he stood. He felt the unease of the house, a tension that clung to the walls, as if the place itself was afraid to breathe. A dream, he thought, could sometimes be more than a dream. It could be a memory or a warning. He went upstairs alone. The bedroom was untouched. Everything remained exactly as it had been that morning. The white bedspread, the single candle melted down to its base. The window slightly opened to let in the soft breath of the storm. On the nightstand sat a journal, bound in green leather. Poirot opened it gently, scanning the final entry. If I dream it once more, it will come for me. I have seen the face. I have seen the hands. I cannot wake before it reaches me. He closed the book, his expression unreadable. The handwriting was steady, deliberate, not the scrawl of a frightened woman, but of someone who had accepted what was to come. Poirot's eyes moved to the mirror above the dresser. Its surface was faintly clouded, like a mist clinging to the glass. And there, in the reflection, he saw something odd, a faint smudge on the edge of the pillow. Not dirt, not blood, something finer, like dust from a flower. He took out a handkerchief and touched the spot. A faint trace of pollen came away, pale yellow, almost invisible. He examined it closely. Interesting, he murmured. Behind him, the door creaked. Edwin Melrose stood there, uneasy. You shouldn't be in here alone, he said. Mother doesn't like anyone touching her things. Poirot smiled faintly. I'm not touching. I am observing. Edwin frowned. I told you, she wasn't right in the head. All that talk about dreams. She was scaring Mother half to death. Maybe she, He stopped, unwilling to finish. Poirot turned to face him. You believe she took her own life? Edwin hesitated. Maybe. She was tired, worn down. She hadn't been herself since he paused again. Since the engagement broke off. Poirot's eyes sharpened. The engagement. To whom? Simon Gray, Edwin said quietly. Father didn't approve. Said the man was after her money. They argued. Simon left the country 2 months ago. Poirot's gaze moved back to the journal on the table. And yet she still dreamed of death. Not heartbreak, not loss, but death. There is a difference, yes? Edwin had no answer. He only turned and left the room, his footsteps echoing down the corridor like fading guilt. That night, Poirot sat alone in the guest room, the journal open before him. The rain had eased, but the house was restless. Floorboards creaked as if the dead still walked above them. He read through the earlier pages, entries about the garden, the lake, her late father's study. And then, slowly, the tone changed. The last 10 pages spoke of shadows, of standing at the window and seeing someone by the trees, of hearing footsteps outside her door at night, and of a whisper that said her name while she slept. Poirot leaned back, closing his eyes. It was not madness. It was fear, a fear that had been planted and carefully nurtured until it bloomed into despair. He whispered to the darkness. Someone made her believe the dream was real. Someone who wished her gone. As he reached to close the book, a folded paper slipped out from between the pages. It was a small sketch, charcoal, faint but detailed. The outline of a face. A man's face. Poirot studied it closely, holding it under the lamplight. The jaw was strong, the eyes half hidden by shadow, the mouth curved in a faint, knowing smile. There were initials in the corner, S.G. Simon Gray, Poirot said softly. He placed the sketch back into the book. Outside, the thunder returned, rumbling like a warning through the night. And somewhere deep in the house, a door creaked open on its own. A single cold gust of air moved through the hallway, like the breath of someone unseen. Poirot rose and went to the window. Down by the lake, in the darkness, a single light flickered, faint, distant, and moving. Someone was out there. The next morning came gray and silent. Poirot walked to the lake with Inspector Graves, their boots sinking into the wet earth. The light from the previous night was gone, but the mud bore a new set of footprints, small, sharp, leading toward the water. At the edge of the lake lay something pale. Poirot crouched and lifted it carefully. It was a torn piece of white fabric. Silk. He turned it over in his gloved hand. It smelled faintly of lavender and smoke. He looked toward the water. The surface was still, reflecting the dull sky like a sheet of metal. Beneath it, something shimmered faintly. Inspector, Poirot said quietly, send a man to search the lake. I believe we may find something that was meant to remain hidden. Graves gave the order. Within minutes, the constables waded into the shallows, their poles dipping into the murky water. Then came a shout. A small chest, heavy with mud, was dragged from the depths. Poirot watched as they pried it open. Inside were letters, dozens of them, wrapped in red ribbon. And on top, a photograph. It was Clara Melrose and Simon Gray, standing by the lake, smiling. But someone had scratched Simon's face out completely. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A dream that killed her? No, a lie that became her nightmare. He stood, silent and still, as the wind stirred the reeds and the rain began again. The investigation had only begun, and already the dead were whispering through the storm. Chapter 2. The Shadow in the Water. The morning mist clung to the surface of the lake like breath on a mirror. It was pale, cold, and still. A hush had fallen over Enderby Hall, as if the house itself feared to speak. Poirot stood at the water's edge. He watched as the last of the constables carried the chest away, the wet earth sucking at their boots. Inside that chest lay letters and secrets, sealed long before Clara's final dream. Inspector Graves joined him, his collar turned up against the damp wind. I've sent the box to the station, he said. We'll sort through it this afternoon. Looks like years' worth of correspondence between Clara and Simon Gray. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. Love letters, perhaps, or confessions. Either way, they're the language of the heart, and the heart, Inspector, is often where murder begins. Graves grunteth. You think this wasn't suicide, then? Poirot turned from the water, his gaze moving to the house on the hill. She locked her door. No sign of struggle. No poison, no wound. And yet, he paused. There is always a hand, even in an invisible crime. We must find whose hand it was. As they walked back toward the house, Poirot's mind played with fragments. The pollen on the pillow, the sketch with Simon's initials, the fabric torn near the lake. Each piece fit somewhere, but not yet in sight. Inside, Lady Melrose sat near the fireplace, her eyes hollow. The portrait of Clara hung above the mantel, and the flicker of the flames gave it life. The eyes seemed to glisten, the lips half-parted as if they might speak. Poirot bowed slightly. Madam, I have found something that belonged to your daughter. A collection of letters. They will remain in police custody for now. Lady Melrose's gaze didn't move from the portrait. Letters from Simon? Yes, Poirot said gently. Were you aware of their existence? Her hands twisted together. I burned the ones I knew of. I thought if she forgot him, she might live again. But she found ways to hide them. Clara was stubborn in love. Poirot studied her quietly. Did you ever meet this Simon Gray, madam? She hesitated. Once. He came here last year. Polite, soft-spoken. But there was something empty behind his smile. My husband disliked him instantly. He said Simon carried a shadow with him. Poirot tilted his head. A shadow. Tell me more. She drew a shivering breath. Strange things began after he left. Footsteps at night. The servants whispering they'd seen a man near the trees. Clara said she heard someone calling her name when she walked by the lake. Poirot leaned closer. And you believed her? I wanted to, but she looked so pale, so certain that her dream was real. I told her dreams are only dreams, but she said, No, Mother, this one is waiting for me. A log shifted in the fire. Sparks leapt and vanished. Poirot straightened, eyes thoughtful. Tell me, Lady Melrose, who knew she locked her door from the inside that night? Only her maid and Dr. Crane. He brought her the sedative. Poirot's expression darkened. Dr. Crane. Yes. Later that afternoon, Poirot asked to see the doctor again. They met in the library, its tall windows streaked with rain. Shelves of unread books rose around them like silent witnesses. Dr. Crane entered with calm precision, his dark coat buttoned, his movements measured. You wish to speak with me, Mr. Poirot? Yes, doctor. I have been thinking of the sedative you prepared for Miss Melrose. Valerian and lavender, Crane replied evenly. I told you that. Poirot nodded. Indeed. But I wonder, is it possible that something else was added? Something that might not show in the blood? Crane's jaw stiffened. You're implying I poisoned her. I'm implying nothing, Poirot said mildly. Only that she died without struggle. A sleep too deep to wake from. The mind can be silenced as surely as the body. Crane's eyes flashed. You're looking in the wrong place. That girl was drowning in grief long before I treated her. Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. Then tell me, Doctor, why did you visit her room after midnight? For the first time, Crane's composure faltered. How do you? Poirot lifted a small object from his pocket. A glass vial, faint traces of residue clinging to the inside. This was found in the wastebasket by her bed. The cork bears your initials. You were there that night. Crane's face paled. I brought her more medicine. She was restless. That's all. Poirot studied him for a long moment. Did she take it willingly? Silence stretched between them. Finally, Crane said, Yes. She trusted me. Poirot sighed. Trust is a dangerous thing, doctor. It makes the blade sharper when it turns. Crane's voice dropped. Are you accusing me? I accuse no one, Poirot said quietly. But I will find the truth. And the truth, doctor, has a way of surfacing, like a shadow rising through water. Crane turned away, his fists tightening at his sides. You should leave this to the police. Dreams and shadows. You'll lose yourself chasing them. Poirot gave a faint smile. Perhaps, but sometimes the shadow knows more than the man who casts it. That evening, the storm broke again. The wind battered the windows, and the house seemed to groan under the weight of it. Poirot sat alone in the study. The letters spread before him in neat rows. Each one began with affection, my dearest Clara, my only light. But as they went on, the tone darkened. Simon wrote of doubt, of fear, of dreams that haunted even him. When I close my eyes, I see you in white, standing by the lake. You call to me, but I cannot reach you. The water is too deep. Poirot read the last line aloud in a whisper. If I cannot have you in life, I will have you in dreams. He folded the letter carefully. The rain against the windows began to sound like fingers tapping on glass. Then came a knock at the door. Edwin Melrose entered, his face pale. Mr. Poirot, something's happened." They climbed the stairs quickly. The maid, trembling, waited by Clara's locked door. "I was turning down the sheets," she stammered. "I thought I heard her voice." Poirot looked at her sharply. Her voice. Yes, from inside the room. She was whispering, calling for help. Graves arrived moments later. Together, they forced the lock. The room was dark, untouched since the night of her death. Yet something had changed. The mirror above the dresser was cracked clean through the center, a single jagged line dividing Clara's reflection in two. Poirot approached slowly. On the pillow lay a fresh flower petal, yellow, dusted with pollen. He lifted it, holding it to the lamplight. "The same pollen," he murmured. "The same as before. Graves fronith. Someone's been in here." Poirot nodded. "Yes, and they wish to remind us she still dreams." Later, in a hallway, Poirot stopped before the window overlooking the lake. The moon was rising, pale and cold. He could see the faint outline of the dock, the reeds swaying in the wind. A shadow moved among them, just for a moment, and was gone. Poirot's breath left him in a single word: Simon. The next day, a message arrived by post. No return address. The paper smelled faintly of salt and damp earth. Inside, a single sentence written in sharp, deliberate hand. "You cannot wake her. She's already mine." Poirot held the letter between his fingers, his eyes dark with understanding. He turned to Graves. "This was written recently. The ink is fresh. Our Mr. Simon Gray may not be so far from home." Graves muttered, "But the man's supposed to be overseas." Poirot shook his head. "Then someone wants us to believe that. Dreams can be forged, Inspector. So can lies." That evening, Poirot asked Edwin to join him in the drawing room. The fire burned low, throwing long shadows across the floor. "Tell me about your sister's last walk," Poirot said softly. Edwin hesitated. "She went to the lake. I followed her halfway down the path. She didn't see me. She was talking to someone. I heard her say, 'Please, not again.' And then she looked toward the trees and said, 'You promised.'" Poirot's eyes sharpened. "And did you see who she spoke to?" Edwin shook his head. "No, but when she came back, she looked as if she'd seen a ghost." Poirot sat back, his mind moving with quiet precision. "There are no ghosts, Mr. Melrose. Only people who wish us to believe in them." He rose and looked toward the window once more. The rain had stopped. The air was still, and down by the lake, that faint light flickered again, steady this time, waiting. When the clock struck midnight, Poirot slipped from his room and walked through the silent hall. Each board creaked beneath his careful steps. The air smelled faintly of lavender and candle wax. He followed the path down to the lake, guided by the small, trembling flame ahead. As he reached the shore, the mist parted. Someone stood there, a man in a dark coat, holding a lantern. Poirot called out, "Mr. Simon Gray, I presume." The man turned slowly. His face was pale, older than the photograph, but unmistakable. He said nothing. Poirot stepped closer. "You have been haunting this house, yes? You frightened her with your whispers and your shadows." The man's voice was soft, broken. "I never meant for her to die. She said she saw it. She begged me to stop coming. But I couldn't. I loved her." Poirot's tone hardened. "Love, monsieur, does not creep in through windows and steal the peace of the living." Simon dropped the lantern. It hissed out in the mud. "She said if she dreamt it again, she'd die. I thought if I made her face it, she'd see it wasn't real. I wanted to prove it was only fear." Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. "And so you gave her the sedative, did you not?" Simon froze. Poirot nodded slowly. "You returned that night. The door was locked, but the window was not. You entered, gave her the tincture the doctor prepared, thinking it would calm her, but stopped her heart instead." Simon's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know. I swear it." Poirot looked out over the lake, the water black beneath the moonlight. "The truth, Mr. Gray, is a heavy stone. Once thrown, it cannot be caught again. He turned to face him once more, but Simon was gone. The mist swallowed his figure, leaving only ripples spreading across the dark water. Poirot stood alone on the shore. Behind him, the lights of Enderby Hall glimmered faintly through the fog. Before him, the lake whispered and sighed, holding its secrets tight. He whispered to the night, "The dream has ended, but the shadow remains." Chapter 3. The House That Would Not Sleep. The rain had finally stopped, but the air inside Enderby Hall was colder than ever. The fire in the drawing room burned low, its glow fading into pools of shadow that reached across the walls like fingers. Poirot sat in silence before it, the soft ticking of the clock the only sound. Inspector Graves stood nearby, his eyes heavy with sleeplessness. Neither man spoke for several minutes. The storm had passed, but the tension had not. At last, Graves said, "The men searched the grounds, Poirot. There's no sign of Simon Gray. If he was there last night, he's gone now." Poirot didn't look up. His eyes followed the slow movement of the clock's hands. Gone? Perhaps, but not far. He is tied to this place by something stronger than rope. Graves froneth. You think he'll come back? Poirot nodded once. Yes. He has nowhere else to go. Guilt is a chain, Inspector. It drags the sinner back to the scene of his sin. The inspector rubbed his forehead. So what now? We wait for a ghost. Poirot finally looked at him, his gaze sharp. There are no ghosts here, my friend. Only a truth buried beneath fear and silence. But before we uncover it, we must listen to what this house is trying to say. As the evening fell again, Poirot moved through the halls of Enderby Hall. The portraits watched him in the flickering candlelight, ancestors frozen in painted stillness, their eyes reflecting stories of pride and tragedy. Each room smelled faintly of wax and decay, as though time itself had grown tired of waiting. He entered Clara's bedroom once more. The cracked mirror still hung above the dresser. The bed remained perfectly made, untouched since her death. Poirot's eyes traced the details. The open window latch, the small mark on the sill where something sharp had scraped the paint, and there, near the foot of the bed, a single footprint faintly pressed into the carpet. Not Clara's. Larger, heavier. He crouched down, studying it. The heel print was shallow, but the toe had dug deep, the mark of a man who had moved quietly but fast. Poirot straightened, murmuring to himself. He came through the window. Yes, he came to comfort her, or to silence her. And when he saw what he had done, he fled, but left behind his shadow. A floorboard creaked behind him. Poirot turned. Lady Melrose stood in the doorway, her face pale and thin in the candlelight. "I thought you had gone to rest, madam," he said softly. "I cannot sleep," she whispered. "No one in this house sleeps anymore." Poirot studied her for a moment. "Because of your daughter's death?" She hesitated. "Because of what comes after?" Poirot stepped closer. "After?" She looked away, her voice trembling. "Each night, I hear her. Footsteps in the corridor. The sound of the window closing. Sometimes, I hear her crying." Poirot's eyes darkened. "You believe she haunts this house?" Lady Melrose's voice broke. "I don't know what to believe anymore. She was my child, and I could not save her. If she has returned, perhaps it is to punish me." Poirot placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "No, madame, the dead do not seek vengeance. Only the living do. Tell me, what did you burn the night before she died?" Her eyes widened. "How did you?" Poirot's tone remained calm. "The ashes in the hearth of your study. Paper, several sheets, torn by hand. I saw them this morning." Lady Melrose closed her eyes. They were his letters. Simon's. All of them. She shook her head. "No, there was one I cannot burn. I hid it. I was afraid." Poirot waited. She went to the bureau and unlocked a drawer. Inside lay a single folded letter, the edges browned by flame, but mostly intact. She handed it to him. It came a week before she died. Poirot unfolded it carefully. The writing was hurried, almost desperate. Clara, you must leave that house. There is something there that watches you. It knows your fear. If you stay, it will take you as it took her. Poirot's eyes lifted. As it took who? Lady Melrose whispered. Her aunt. My husband's sister. She drowned in that same lake 20 years ago. They said she sleepwalked into the water, but my husband always believed it was suicide. Poirot folded the letter. A pattern, then. Dreams, sleep, death by stillness. And all within this same house. He turned toward the window. Lady Melrose, I must ask that no one leaves this place tonight. There is still something here, something living, not dead, that needs to be revealed. Hours later, as midnight neared again, Poirot gathered everyone in the drawing room. Lady Melrose, Edwin, Dr. Crane, the maid, Inspector Graves. The fire burned brightly, casting long shadows behind them. Poirot stood before the hearth, his reflection shimmering faintly in the cracked glass of the mantel mirror. My friends, he began quietly, we are trapped not by walls, but by fear. This house has been held in silence for too long, and tonight that silence ends. Edwin shifted uneasily. If you've got something to say, Poirot, just say it. Poirot nodded. Very well. Clara Melrose did not die of illness or poison or madness. She died of fear, a fear that was given to her by someone she trusted. All eyes turned toward Dr. Crane. The doctor's voice was steady, but his face was pale. If you're accusing me again, Poirot lifted a hand. You provided her with medicine, but the tincture itself was harmless. No, doctor, your guilt lies not in action, but in ignorance. Someone used your kindness to create the perfect illusion. He turned to Edwin. You said your sister spoke of hearing voices, of seeing someone near the trees. Tell me, who else knew of those fears? Edwin swallowed hard. We all did. Indeed, Poirot said, but one among us used those fears to drive her deeper into the dream. Someone who knew her routine, her habits, her sleeping hours. The maid began to tremble. You don't think. Poirot's gaze landed on her. Ah, but I do. You. Miss Turner brought her tea each night. And in that tea, you placed not a sedative, but something stronger, something that mimics sleep. The girl's eyes widened. No, I only gave her what the doctor prescribed. Poirot's tone softened. I believe you. You were told to do so. Someone gave you the vial and said it came from the doctor. Her lip quivered. It was Mr. Edwin. He said it would help her rest. A gasp rippled through the room. Edwin's chair scraped back. That's a lot. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Is it? Or have you been lying to yourself for days, Mr. Melrose? You loved your sister, yes. But love can turn to hate when the world forgets which of you is stronger. Edwin's face twisted. She had everything. The money, the attention, the inheritance. And she wasted it all on that man, Simon Gray. He ruined her. She was losing her mind, and you all stood by watching. Poirot's voice was quiet but relentless. So you decided to end her suffering. One drop too many in her tea. A gentle sleep forever. Edwin's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted her to stop dreaming. Poirot's tone turned grave. But you did kill her. And because of your guilt, you try to bury it in shadows. You spread the story of her dream. You even wrote that letter to yourself, pretending it came from Simon, to keep the blame away. Lady Melrose covered her mouth, horrified. Edwin, what have you done? He turned to her, shaking. I tried to save her mother. She was already gone. I just wanted her to rest. Poirot stepped forward. And when you saw her in death, so peaceful, you began to dream of her yourself. The whispering, the footsteps, they were not her, but your own conscience speaking in the dark. Edwin dropped to his knees, his voice cracking. It was supposed to be a kindness. Poirot's voice softened. Murder never is. The silence that followed was unbearable. The fire crackled, throwing light across faces pale with shock. Finally, Inspector Graves stepped forward and placed a hand on Edwin's shoulder. "You'll come with me, son," he said quietly. Edwin didn't resist. He rose slowly, tears streaking down his face. As Graves led him away, Poirot turned toward the window. The moon was rising once again, casting a silver path across the lake. Lady Melrose whispered, "Will she rest now?" Poirot nodded gently. "Yes, the house will sleep again. Dreams lose their power once truth is awake." Later that night, when the house had fallen silent, Poirot returned to the bedroom one last time. The cracked mirror caught his reflection, soft and still. He looked at the empty bed, at the pale curtains stirring in the wind. He whispered, "You can sleep now, mademoiselle. The dream is finished." A faint breeze passed through the room. The candle flickered once, then went out. And for the first time in many nights, Enderby Hall was quiet. Chapter 4. The Dream Ends. The dawn came slowly to Enderby Hall. A pale, uncertain light crept through the curtains, spilling across the floorboards that had once carried the weight of secrets. The house, for the first time in years, was quiet. No whispers, no echoes, only silence. Hercule Poirot stood by the window, his silhouette outlined against the morning mist that curled over the lake. In that stillness, the detective seemed almost carved from stone, unmoving, thoughtful, precise. The night's confession had left a scar upon the household, yet it had also lifted the shadow that hung there. Truth had done what sleep never could. It had given peace. Inspector Graves entered softly, his hat in hand. "It's over, Poirot. Edwin's been taken into custody. He hasn't said another word since last night." Poirot didn't turn. He will not. The burden of guilt is heavier than any chain. It will speak for him. Graves nadie. I suppose you were right all along about everything. You always are. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "Not always, mon ami." He stopped himself. He had promised. No foreign words. "Not always, my friend. I simply listen. The truth speaks softly, but it always speaks. Graves saif. Still, it's a tragic business. All that fuss about a dream." Poirot's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. But it was not the dream that killed her, Inspector. It was what hid inside it: guilt, fear, and silence. The human heart can create its own ghosts. Graves looked down. "You think she knew? Before she died?" Poirot finally turned, his expression unreadable. "She knew. Perhaps not in words, but in instinct. The mind can sense betrayal even as it sleeps. That is why her dream was so vivid. She saw her own death because she already felt it coming." The inspector shivered slightly. "And Simon Gray? Any idea where he's gone?" Poirot's gaze softened. "He will return. Not here, perhaps, but to himself. Love leaves its mark, even when it ends in tragedy. Graves nadie. I'll send word to London. Let them know the case is closed." Poirot inclined his head. "Yes, but tell them it was never a case. It was a confession waiting to be heard." Graves gave a small, tired smile. "You really believe that, don't you?" Poirot looked once more toward the lake, the water still as glass. "Ido. Every crime begins as a whisper in someone's soul. Some are loud. Others take the form of dreams. That afternoon, the heavy clouds parted and sunlight poured across the long grass of the garden. Lady Melrose walked slowly beside Poirot, her black dress fluttering faintly in the breeze. She seemed older now, not in years, but in spirit. "Will he hang?" she asked quietly. Poirot hesitated. "That will be for the court to decide. But I do not think he wishes to live, madam. His punishment began the moment the dream ended." She nodded weakly. "He was always so gentle, so kind as a boy." Poirot's eyes were compassionate. "Grief twists the gentle ones, Lady Melrose. He believed he was saving her. That is often how evil begins, disguised as mercy." They stopped at the edge of the lake. The water shimmered with reflections of white clouds drifting above. Lady Melrose knelt, plucking a single white flower from the reeds, and let it fall into the still water. "Rest now, my darling," she whispered. Poirot bowed his head. "She will, madam. The dead do not haunt the living. It is the living who haunt themselves." As evening fell once more, Poirot prepared to leave. His suitcase rested near the great oak door, the same door through which he had entered only days ago, when this house was thick with unease and whispers. Now it stood calm. The maid, Miss Turner, approached timidly. "Will you be going back to London, sir?" "Yes," Poirot said gently. "To my little apartment, where there are no ghosts, only good coffee and too many newspapers." She smiled faintly. "You think she's at peace now?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Yes, because she was heard. That is all the dead ever ask for." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Thank you, sir, for bringing quiet back." Poirot tipped his hat. "It is not I who brought it, mademoiselle. It was truth." The carriage ride away from Enderby Hall was slow and silent. The fields rolled past in gentle shades of gray and green. The sky, heavy with fading light, seemed to hold its breath. Poirot leaned back, hands folded neatly in his lap. His mind, usually restless with deduction, was still, but his heart was not. He thought of Clara, of her final dream, of Edwin, who had loved her too much and too wrongly, and of the house, that great hollow monument to silence, which had nearly devoured them all. It reminded him, as it always did, of the delicate balance between love and destruction. How often they were the same face. He murmured softly to himself, "Dreams are strange things. They're the shadows of what we cannot say aloud." The driver glanced back. "You say something, sir?" Poirot smiled. "Only to myself. It is a habit of detectives." That night, in his London flat, Poirot sat by his desk, writing in his small black notebook, the one he kept for reflections, not facts. The lamplight glowed softly over the page. Outside, the city murmured in distant motion, 1,000 lives unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded miles away. He wrote, "The case of Clara Melrose reminds me that fear is the most dangerous weapon of all. It kills quietly, invisibly, through the mind. One must never surrender to it, for fear turns truth into nightmare, and only truth can wake us again." He paused, looking at those words for a long while. Then he closed the notebook gently, as though sealing away a fragile thought. The next morning, a letter arrived. The handwriting was neat but trembling. It was from Lady Melrose. It read, "Monsieur Poirot, the house is peaceful now. Last night, I slept for the first time since Clara's death. I did not dream. Thank you for giving her rest and giving me silence. Yours, Eleanor Melrose." Poirot folded the letter carefully, placed it in a drawer, and looked out the window. The sky was bright, and for the first time in days, he smiled. Hours later, as he sipped his morning coffee, he caught his own reflection in the glass. For a brief moment, it seemed to waver, just like the mirror at Enderby Hall. But then the sunlight broke through the window, and the illusion vanished. Poirot chuckled softly. "Oh no, my friend. Even mirrors can lie." He set the cup down and adjusted his tie with quiet satisfaction. Another dream ended, he murmured. Another truth awakened. Epilogue, the dream that killed her. 3 months later, a newspaper headline appeared briefly in the Daily Chronicle. "Young heir sentenced to life for manslaughter of sister." Edwin Melrose's emotional confession at trial moved the court. He will serve life imprisonment, but the judge acknowledged the crime was born of grief, not malice. Below it, a smaller column read, "Lady Melrose has left Enderby Hall. The estate will remain unoccupied until further notice. Local villagers say the hall is finally silent. The lake is still. The house sleeps once more." Poirot read the article, folded the paper, and sighed softly. Justice, in its imperfect way, had been served. He turned to his window once again. Outside, the streets of London were alive with motion and noise. Carriages clattering, people shouting, vendors calling. It was a world too alive for dreams. And yet, somewhere in the back of his mind, Poirot wondered how many others still lived trapped inside dreams that could one day kill them. He stood, straightened his jacket, and whispered, "The world never stops dreaming, but as long as truth remains, so shall I." He blew out the lamp, and the light faded slowly to black. If you enjoyed this mystery, The Dream That Killed Her, and want more dark, psychological Hercule Poirot stories, remember to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell for the next case. Because in a world of shadows and secrets, only one mind can see the truth before the dream ends.